Hello and welcome to Zestology, the podcast all about energy, vitality and motivation. I'm Tony Wrighton in London on a beautiful sunny day. Is spring almost here? Probably not, but it's nice to imagine that it might be, isn't it? Today's guest is a repeat guest on Zestology, Ryan Munsey, biohacking expert, knows so much about the subject of kind of optimising one's health and performance, and is also the author of a very provocatively titled new book. It's called Fuck Your Feelings. It's a bit daring, isn't it? So as well as bringing out his new book, he's got a new podcast as well. And in this chat, we talk about jet lag and how to beat it, optimising your performance with supplements and also gym workouts too, and blue light blocking glasses and other ways to block blue light in the evenings. I found out some really cool stuff from Ryan, which I didn't know about blocking blue light in the evenings. Since we recorded this a couple of days ago, I've been doing a little bit of investigation, and it looks pretty cool what he was talking about. So I hope you enjoy that, and hope you enjoy his new book, which is out on the day that this podcast is released. So as you listen to this today, Ryan's book is out. As always, thank you for listening to Zestology. Enjoy the podcast with Ryan. Here he is. Ryan, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Tony. This is something I've been looking forward to for a few days, so it's good to catch up with you, man.
Me too. When we chatted before, it was a proper geek out, and we met in person as well. It was a proper geek out, wasn't it?
It really was, man. We had a lot of fun, and like you said, we got to hang out a little bit in person at the Bulletproof conference back in October. That was in LA.
Are you going to Paleo FX?
You know, I'm on the fence about it right now. I actually have the opportunity. I met this really fantastic woman named Kiki Bosch when I spoke at the Biohackers Summit in Sweden last year. And it turns out Kiki is an ice water freediver.
Wow.
So, yeah, you combine like Wim Hof breathing and cold thermogenesis with freediving. Like she'll literally sit on an iceberg and then just dive into the water. But anyway, she's going to be in the U.S. The week before and the week of Paleo FX, and I'm setting up an interview with her for our podcast, the new show, Better Human Project. And to make it worth her while to come from New York down to Virginia, we are looking into actually setting up a Wim Hof seminar. She's a certified Wim Hof instructor.
Yeah.
So we're going to set up a Wim Hof seminar in Virginia Beach. It looks like the dates are going to be April 28th and 29th, which will be the same weekend as Paleo FX. So, unfortunately, I may have to skip that event, but I'd love to be there. It just seems like there's always 2 or 3 things going on that same weekend. So I may have to stay at home and do something I've never done before.
Well, that sounds like a pretty good reason for not going.
Are you going to be there?
Yeah, I am going to be there. Yeah, and just kind of really by chance, I was like, I'm just going to have a look at Air Miles flights to Austin, and then I was able to get the flights on Air Miles, and I'm flying first class, which is amazing.
Oh, you got a lot of miles.
Yeah, I did have quite a lot of miles, and I'm still not going to eat the food though. Because that's one I always used to get off flights and I used to be bloated. And the first flight that I ever did, it was only October, I think, when I went to the Bulletproof conference. Long distance flight, 12 hours, no food, came off feeling better than I did when I got on there. And the jet lag was reduced as well. So another benefit to kind of intermittent fasting or fasting, cheeky little 24-hour fast, which includes a flight. And I felt really good afterwards. So that's something that I probably will do again.
Yeah, it's really cool how you can kind of use the time zone changes to your advantage to either extend or shorten those fasting windows based on which way you travel. I'm curious, you said that one was going to Los Angeles. I usually don't have a problem when I travel west with jet lag, but when I travel east, it rocks my world no matter what I do. So when you went home, did you have jet lag?
Look, I'm exactly the same. And actually, it was worse. Since I last saw you, I went to Thailand in January. And the flying east bit, got on a flight at like 10 o'clock in the morning and got off 12 hours later, hadn't had any sleep. It was, I don't know, about 9 o'clock in the morning or something like that. That was just so hard. Way back, slept like a baby, slept for 7 hours, and I fasted both ways on that one. So yeah, it's definitely helped deal with jet lag, but it didn't help that much flying east.
Right. One of the best tips I've ever heard for jet lag it came from Mark Sisson, actually. And he said that as soon as you get on a plane, change all of your time settings. So whether it's a watch, a cell phone, a computer, change all of those to your destination's time as soon as you get on the plane, and it gives you a little bit more time to adjust. So for example, if I'm flying from the East Coast of the US to the West Coast, there's a 3-hour time difference. So if my flight leaves at noon, as soon as I get on the plane, I'd set everything to 9 a.m. and you just start acclimating as quickly as possible to that new time zone.
That's cool. It's so simple, but actually it does, of course, make sense.
I've been doing it for probably 2 years ever since he told me about it, and it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Have you tried the human charger?
I have. I love it. I've actually got one sitting within arm's reach of me right now. Yari is a great guy.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've met Yari or not. He's I've met him at a few different events, and the human charger is great. It's I'm sure you've talked about it on the show before, but essentially it's utilizing photo biomodulation, and we have receptors in our ear canals. They're photo or light receptors, and we're blasting them with white light, which is what we get around noon, and it's sort of signaling our bodies that it's time to be awake. And the thing I love about the human charger is the app that comes with it, and you can just plug in what time zone you're going from, what time you're leaving, where you're going, and it tells you exactly when to use it. So there's they take the guesswork out of everything. So it's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think with all these things, Ryan, and I'm sure you agree, you've got to balance optimizing your health and feeling good along with just a relatively normal existence. And one of the things that I found hard with the human charger was, I remember I used it on a flight to Puerto Rico, and the app told me that I needed to use it about 2 hours before we landed. Perfect, great idea. And then when we landed, perfect, great idea. And then 2 hours after that, when I think I was in a bar somewhere in the capital of Puerto Rico, and then 2 hours after that, where I think I'd had a few drinks, and I was like, I've got to put these earbuds in again, and everyone's asking me what they are and why I've got these weird lights in my ears. So actually, it's a bit of a talking point. It's all right in the end, but it's just the practicalities of doing it. But I reckon it made jet lag about 50% better.
Yeah, you bring up a good point is, finding the balance with all of this stuff, whether it's human charger or anything else that we use. How do we make sure that it fits in with our lives and isn't running the show or causing some inconvenience that is larger than the potential benefit we might get from it. But you're right. I think it does reduce jet lag quite a bit. There's another use that I have for the human charger, and I love it right around the time of year where time changes.
Yeah.
And I don't know that they advertise it for that purpose or not, but when we fall back with daylight savings and it starts to get dark at 5 o'clock or even earlier. I think when I met Yari, it was actually in Finland in November of it must have been 2016, and that was the first time I'd been that far north that late in the year. So it's, it was getting dark at 3:30 in the afternoon.
Wow. Yeah.
And the sun doesn't come up until 9. I had just flown east, so I was already jet lagged. I mean, I was just really struggling to acclimate. And, the human charger being a non-stimulant thing is something that you can use more often or with more kind of longevity than something like caffeine or coffee. So it was really helpful with the time change, but also with like time of day and daylight savings. So when I got home, it's still November, I'm in the US, and it's getting dark at 5. And I don't know about you, but when that happens seasonally for me, I have a hard time not wanting to go to bed at 8 o'clock, 3 hours after the sun goes down. So I know what happens, if we kind of get that cortisol kind of bottoming out, which is good if we go to bed at that time. If we don't go to bed, we actually kind of create this like subsequent cortisol spike to help keep us awake. And that's not necessarily a good thing. So I've been using the human charger around 4:45 or 5 o'clock, right as the sun would go down,
Interesting.
and kind of get that like false light boost that would kind of push me through another hour or two. And then I would start to wind down, of course, doing all this stuff to reduce blue light after that period, with blue light blockers or screen protectors or whatever. I'm actually a big fan of Iris as a software system to block blue light for your computer. It's far more effective than glasses or anything like that.
Well, what's Iris?
Iris was it's a computer program invented by a guy named Daniel Georgiev. He's Belgian, and he tried to submit it to Flux. I think that's that's like the most common and most people's favorite. Yeah, he actually tried to give it to them as an enhancement for their platform, and they weren't interested in it. So he just finished it, took it live, and I believe the website is iris.io. If I'm wrong on that, I will send you the correct link. We can put it in both of our show notes. But it was fascinating talking to him because he's taken into account things like flicker rate and how that impacts the number of times that we blink. He talked about if you have a computer screen that is glossy and not a matte finish, that you have this thing called it's basically glare or reflection, and I think he called it double image. But like if you're looking at your computer right now, if you look closely, you can probably see your reflection. And whether you know it or not, your eyes are constantly battling that and actually trying to ignore that image and actually focus on what's on the screen.
No way.
Yeah, so it's really fascinating to talk to him and hear. He's done a TEDx talk on how computer screens and monitors are really harming our eyes, and it's so much more than blue light. And we had him on my previous show, the Optimal Performance Podcast, and just really fascinating to explore that impact beyond blue light, because in the biohacking world, I think that's sort of the beginning and the end of the conversation. But he also has some functions on his Iris software that will totally eliminate blue light. And, I did some tests and took images to show people the difference of, here's my screen with Iris blocking all blue light. And then here's my screen without it. And then here's my screen looking through blue blocker glasses. And there's just no comparison. There's still a ton of blue light coming through with those glasses.
Yeah.
Now,
wow.
It's less than if you don't have them. But if you're serious about it, you can spend $10 on Iris, or you could spend $80 or $100 on blue blocker glasses, and one of them is going to block 100% of blue light. The other one's not. And the one that blocks the most is actually the $10 software program. So,
it's. I mean, when I think about the things that have worked best for me, I mean, going back to flights, blue blockers on flights, I found have been really handy. And I mean, melatonin just knocked me out. And actually, that was a few years ago that I tried it, and God knows what brand of melatonin I bought. But that left me groggy for about 3 or 4 days. And so I wouldn't really be inclined to use melatonin to help sleep or to help with jet lag. I'll tell you something, though. I've found something over the last few weeks that I'm so excited about. I use the Oura Ring to track my sleep. Do you use the Oura Ring as well?
I haven't yet, but
Yeah.
I am a big fan of it. I think it's probably the best device out there for heart rate variability.
Yeah.
Because you get a 24/7 view of everything. It's not just like if you strap on a heart rate monitor and you check your HRV, you're going to get a snapshot of a certain period in time. But I know with the Oura Ring, it's a 24/7 running thing, and I think that's much more valuable data. So I'm curious to hear.
And the new one doesn't look like a hideous kind of mafia ring either, so that's good as well. But listen to this one. I've been using it since December, and I've got to say it's been a bit of a running joke between me and my girlfriend, because I would wake up in the morning and I would be furious because I thought I was sleeping more than I was, according to the Oura. And actually, I was even saying, do you think this is a faulty one? Maybe there's like something wrong with it. because consistently it was saying that I'd had half an hour to an hour less sleep than I thought I'd had. And the sleep that I was getting was not good quality sleep. Anyway, I started taking 2 supplements recently, L-arginine and L-ornithine. And they've had a huge benefit on the quality of my sleep. I'm sleeping longer than ever before. I'm definitely sleeping deeper and getting more REM sleep and feeling way better when I wake up. And now I realize that Oura was right all along. I needed a little bit of help. And by the way, L-arginine helps with other areas as well.
Yeah, it's good for blood flow. So
it's amazing for blood flow.
I want to point out something that you did there, and that is, using this technology to find gaps in areas of our lives that we want to quantify and then improve. And you took that and you said, all right, here's a space where I can make an improvement, and then you did. So you're using that technology to drive or impact the change that you want. And I think that's something that is not as much a part of the conversation as it should be with a lot of these tools and technologies. What about arginine and ornithine made you want to use those for sleep? And talk maybe a little bit about the benefits of those.
Yeah. I was reading Dave Asprey's book on fertility called The Better Baby Book. Yeah. And he talks about L-arginine in relation to fertility. And he says that if you take this regularly as a man for 2 weeks, it'll raise your sperm count by 2,500%, which sounds to me to be quite extraordinary. But not that I'm trying for a baby yet, but I may be at some point in the future, and that's why I was reading the book. I thought, well, that's worth taking. And he said, you got to take it with L-ornithine because they work well together. And he said the other effects are that it improves sex, improves blood flow. Sometimes it's used as a natural Viagra, and it will help you sleep. So I thought, this is about 4 wins all in a row. Where do I buy it from? Have you taken these supplements? Because I'm not sure. I mean, the other interesting thing is that they both remove ammonia from the system, and ornithine removes ammonia from the brain as well. And I'm just feeling so good from taking this supplement. I'm wondering how other people have found it, and whether it's just me or it's something that other people could benefit from.
I've never taken L-ornithine. I have taken L-arginine in the past, but more for bodybuilding and sort of aesthetic reasons. It's an amino acid that bodybuilders love because it can boost nitric oxide. It is part of that pathway, so you get vasodilation, which is one of the reasons that it increases some of those other areas of performance that you were mentioning, or alluding to, maybe.
Yeah.
So a lot of people in bodybuilding world have used it for like a pre-workout to help facilitate blood flow and get a bigger pump. And I have noticed that when I've taken it in the past, I've not taken it for the specific purpose of benefiting sleep. But now that you mention that, I would like to try it and see, if I can experience that same improvement in quality of sleep.
Ryan, you still there?
I'm here.
Yeah, good. That is very interesting in terms of bodybuilding. Because, one of the things that I've found is, and I'd like to ask you about this actually, because I know this is a kind of a special area of yours. You used to do stuff related to men's health, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah. And so tell me about kind of in terms of like getting a good bod. Now, this might be, I know you've been involved in men's health. You've got a bit of a kind of bodybuilding history. If you're on a kind of low carb or ketogenic diet, how do you build a little bit of muscle? Will L-arginine help with that as well? Because that's something that I think is a bit of a struggle for me. And it may be a bit of a kind of guys, kind of bros topic, but I'm just interested in it.
Yeah, I think in fitness especially, it's a really weird and odd world. And everywhere you look, how do we sell magazines, or now that it's moved to a digital world, how do we get clicks? How does Men's Health or Men's Fitness compete with any other website, and they're trying to get clicks, and they're trying to get people to read through articles, and that brings this element into the industry of, I guess, I don't want to accuse the industry of always being salesy and always, trying to pitch quick fix programs, but it does. You see, they need you to come back the next month. So you see all these 4-week programs or 6-week programs or 30-day programs, and it's really created by the fact that a lot of these magazines needed you to come back and buy the next edition the next month.
30 days is not work, and you come back and buy the next one.
Right. Or you make a little bit of progress and then you do the new workout and the new thing. And if you look at anybody who has had success in their career as a bodybuilder or a power lifter or CrossFit, strongman, any realm of fitness that involves resistance training, you're going to see somebody who has mastered the basics and completed tons and tons and tons of repetitions and workouts that challenged the body, created a stimulus that said, you need to be able to better handle this stressor the next time you see it. And that's another thing that a lot of people don't get from the way fitness is taught in traditional media, is that a workout is a stress. It's called bodybuilding because the idea is that you stress the muscles, you stress the body, you're creating this stimulus that tells the body build itself up bigger, better, stronger, so that the next time it sees that stressor, it is better equipped to handle it. Right. So, I say all that really to kind of set the stage for the thing. The real answer to your question is, the answer is not sexy and it doesn't sell, because it means the real answer is you've got to not work harder, but you've got to expose your body to, stressors and stimuli that tell it to build itself up bigger and better and stronger. So, it's whether that's progressive overload, constantly trying to add weight to the bar, or constantly trying to do more reps with the same weight, or you can increase density by doing the same amount of work in a shorter period of time. So maybe you take one workout, first time you do it, it takes you 30 minutes. Next time you go in, you try to do it in 29 minutes. So those are 3 variables that we can manipulate in any training program. That's weight, reps, and density. And those are 3 ways that you can make progress. And in doing so, you will change your body. From a nutrition standpoint, you'll hear people in any camp argue that their way of eating is the way you need to eat to gain muscle. Whether it's the high carb bodybuilding approach, or, there will be keto people that argue you can build muscle on keto. I've not seen someone gain a significant amount of muscle by eating a ketogenic diet. Doesn't mean it can't be done. It's probably not the optimal approach. And even recently with carnivore diet, Sean Baker is like the biggest proponent of the carnivore diet, which is literally nothing but animal products. It's a 0 carb diet. And he makes the argument that, if you want to lay down new tissue, the easiest way to do that is to eat animal tissue.
Also, he doesn't eat any veggies?
None.
Oh, not sure about that.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff around that as well, but
I'm not sure either for the environment or for one's health. It's the best idea, but yeah, I mean, essentially, it's kind. You probably said kind of stuff that I know already. The keto diet in other areas and the low carb diet agrees with me really well. But yeah, I mean, maybe I'll just have to accept that the Arnie guns aren't going to come if I'm going to be racking up the bulletproof coffees and the high fat, low carb diet. So what's going on, mate? One of the things I think is really interesting is that you've got 2 big projects on the go at the moment, and both of them, I think, one of the important things about biohacking and optimizing health and looking at lifestyle and supplement tweaks is that sometimes one can lose track of the bigger picture of one's purpose in terms of what are you in this all for? And I think that both your projects at the moment, the Better Human Project and your new book, Fuck Your Feelings, very, very daring title, that seems to me that you're really living your purpose, which I just think is exciting.
It is. It's very exciting. And it's really cool to hear, somebody that I respect like yourself see that and realize and recognize that. So I appreciate that.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Better Human Project. We can start there. I mean, that's, really just this huge passion project. And, you mentioned the book. It is called Fuck Your Feelings. We'll talk about that.
Very bold title.
I knew that the book was going to come out in early 2018. And I also knew that part of the promotion for the book was going to be to, go on a bunch of podcasts and do the traditional media stuff. And I did not want to do that and then have people be confused about, where do they follow me? Do they follow me or do they go back to the OPP, which is the old podcast I used to host, and it's owned by Natural Stacks. So I knew that I sort of had to leave that post and start my own podcast.
Oh, so it wasn't the old one wasn't your podcast?
No, it's still on the air. Natural Stacks has that. They hired me to run their podcast in 2015. So it was not something that I could just take in a new direction.
Yeah.
It is theirs. So, I had to step down from that post and start my own.
Yeah.
And as I was thinking through that, I just started, like you mentioned, I think a lot of people are starting to grow weary today with everything that's happening with social media and, brands and people who are building followings to, look, there's nothing wrong with monetizing it, or if you have a business, there's nothing wrong with using social media to grow it and reach people. But I just think that we can do so much better. We can do so much more with these platforms. And, I didn't want another podcast. I didn't want a show that was just going to get lost in the sea of podcasts, and started thinking about, how can this be different? What's missing? And, what do I really want to do with this thing? So there's a few ways that it has kind of evolved from what I was doing with the OPP. And again, that was the Natural Stacks podcast. So, I kind of had to bring everything back to, the brand and the brand's mission. With Better Human Project, we can have all sorts of new conversations. Health and fitness or health and wellness is simply one pillar of being a better human. Now we can have conversations about business or relationships or, how these things are affecting, the greater world. And I'm really excited to be able to, have a wider range of conversations. There's no guest or topic that won't make sense. And the other thing is, there's nothing wrong with using podcasts or social media as a business thing, but supplements are such a small part of who I am and what I do that I just wanted something more than being a part of a supplement company. So I wanted a podcast.
So for you, it made sense. I mean, you can't be doing because you made that podcast what it is, and obviously you're happy that it's continuing to go on and do well. But a podcast is such a personal thing, isn't it? That
it is.
It's probably helped you, presenting that podcast as well in terms of your profile. You're doing really well for yourself as well. But time for the Better Human Project now.
Right. It was a tremendous experience and an opportunity that I'm forever grateful for. But you're right. It was time for my own thing. And, rather than be a show that builds an audience for the sales of supplements, it is now a show that, and I think my podcasting style, people got used to a show that provided actionable information. And that's definitely what I'm continuing to do, because I think if someone listens to a show, that I have a responsibility to honor their time as the host and make sure that they get something out of it that they can immediately implement. And I'm continuing that with what we're doing with the Better Human Project, but it's now going to be in a wider range of areas of our lives. But taking it one step further, it is not just how do we be better humans, but how do we do better for our community and for others? Because, as you said, as kind of the lead in to this, it's great that we're doing all of this stuff for self-optimization and personal growth, but what are we doing with that growth? And that's sort of the question that I started asking myself and asking other people who are in these different areas of this movement. When we go to Bulletproof Conference or when we go to Paleo FX, we have these circles of people that we love seeing and love being around. And it's such a great sounding board to have these conversations. And I think I was tired of those conversations being confined to off air. How do we bring those conversations onto the air to the wider audiences and more people and say, look, we had Caveman Coffee on the show recently, and just for one example, they're saying they were hesitant to do K-cups because of how their impact on the environment, but then they realized that if they didn't make them, then their customers were going to go get K-cups from somebody else. So they said, all right, well, we're going to create 100% compostable K-cups, and they figured out how to do it. And now there are other coffee companies who are
brilliant
using their exact same infrastructure, their exact same process, and basically taking the exact same product that they created. And now there are multiple people with these compostable K-cups. So, these are some of the conversations that we can now have on the podcast and, show people who are listening. We're still providing the tools to be better humans, but then also we're laying down the bridge for how you can actually make an impact, in your community and for the people that you care about.
In terms of purpose, one of the things that I kind of wrestle with slightly is, people are absolutely right when they say you got to do something in life that excites you, because if it doesn't, not only you kind of is time tick-tocking away, but your output won't be exciting, and you're just kind of not making the most of your unique talents. But I think, increasingly in this world, it's very possible to do more than one thing at once with your life. 30, 50 years ago, you would become an accountant, and then you'd be an accountant for 40 years. And now you can be an accountant and you can be a yoga teacher on the side, or you can be a yoga teacher and an accountant on the side. But where do you kind of differentiate between, let's say your life's purpose is to make pottery vases, and you've worked that out at the age of 35 and you've been an accountant all your life. Well, if you're just starting out in the pottery world, it's quite hard to make a profit from pottery straight away. In fact, it's probably quite hard to make a profit from pottery full stop. So if your purpose in life is not to be an accountant, how do you reconcile doing that job 4 or 5 or 3 days a week when you get to do your passion a couple of days a week? Where do you draw the line between working on a passion and then something that facilitates that passion? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm probably the worst person to ask that question because I can't justify it. I'd be the guy that walked away from the steady job.
Really?
And I've done it. I've done it time and time again in my life. And
so for a lesser paid job that is fulfilling your passion.
I've done that time and time again. And, I just, like you said, life is so short and so not guaranteed that I can't rationalize or justify going day after day doing something that I hate, that I'm not passionate about, that is not genuine or authentic. And again, I say I'm probably the worst person because I've done it and I would do it again if I had to. I'll put myself in a situation where, if I don't produce, I can't pay my rent or put food on the table. I've been there. So that's just how I choose to go about my life because, that's where my values and my belief systems
That's
are.
cool. Yeah.
I realize there are other people who need a certain amount of certainty or, wouldn't do that, but I've never done it that way. And I just can't wrap my brain around kind of having one foot in and one foot out in anything. So I don't know how I would advise someone to
There
take
are
that.
other arguments, though. I mean, for instance, if you were to still do the accounting job for 3 days a week, you might have
Right.
£1,000 a month to spend on advertising, for example, or whatever it might be, and that might be another way to grow the pottery business. I know
Yeah.
it's slightly weird examples, but it's a balance to be made as more and more people think about their purpose and becoming a better human. We can't all be potters in this world. That we have to
Right.
have the accountants as well. So,
Right. Well, and some people love it. I mean, some people who are accountants, that's what they want to do. They love numbers and they love, messing with that stuff. So there's nothing wrong with being an accountant. And I'm sure that's not what you're saying.
No.
But no, and you bring up a good point. I mean, there are a lot of people who will kind of protect against the downside or mitigate risk in that leap by, easing into one and easing out of the other simultaneously so that they can, make sure that they have their needs met. And, you can take money from one to pay for your bills and your responsibilities. I should mention that, the times that I've made those moves in the past, they didn't affect children or, spouses.
That's a different thing to think about as well, isn't it?
Right.
Obligations. But
Right.
But I guess that the great thing about this podcast that you've started is that you get the chance to explore purpose. And one of the things in NLP that we talk about is we look at what is called logical levels, which is a rather analytical title for this particular process. But you look at one's priorities, firstly, one's own environment and capabilities, and then you start to look at deeper levels, like what are your values and beliefs and how do you see your identity? And when you start to ask those deeper questions, you start to get some really interesting answers that actually, when you want to emulate someone, if you want to, emulate Richard Branson in business, looking at his capabilities and his environment, that's not really that helpful. But when you start to look at his values and beliefs and what he thinks about himself as a person, that is far more helpful.
Yeah, I actually have this written down in my notes to ask you about, because on the previous the previous podcast that we recorded together, you mentioned something along those lines.
Yeah.
Of, the importance of modeling values rather than modeling behaviors.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, really, that is the process. So I love hearing about what high achievers do in terms of their daily routine. For example, I'll get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I have a coffee and I don't switch my phone on until 9, and I do all my work before anyone else has woken up. And it can be quite inspiring, that. But asking that same person a little bit more about their values and beliefs could provide you more profound information in terms of emulating them. So when you find out what really drives them, if you really want to learn from them, finding out that can be better information. Now, it's hard to do. When you think about modeling somebody, in this day and age, most people are contactable, but if it's someone in the public eye, they might not have time to contact you back. So if it's someone that you can reach out to and they'll respond, it might be, your mentor or the person that you want to emulate might live next door to you, and that'd be great. But it might be a celebrity, in which case then you need to use books or videos or online content to work out what are the things that matters to them. What are their values? What are their beliefs? And what is their identity? And what can I cherry pick from that to put into my own life? No one's saying that you copy someone else, but just saying that you might emulate some of the things that they do. That's it. Really.
I love that. No, I love that. And I think I've always been fortunate in the sense that I grew up with this affinity for math and science. I am curious and I want to understand systems and I want to understand why. And from day one, when I started to hear people say this is what they did, I was always taking it one step further and asking why. So, you lay out that morning routine. Okay, well, this person gets up at 5 and they don't have coffee until 6:30 and they don't turn on their phone until 9. Well, before I implement that into my life, I want to know why I'm doing that. And I think that lends itself to, the what you're saying is you're not seeking what they sought, or you're not. Wait, what? How does it go? It's like don't do what they did, seek what they sought, right? So they're
Right.
trying to figure out the way to, set up their morning for their best day. And if you just try to figure out how do you set up your best morning for your best day, rather than just do what other people say they do, you'll set up your own day for your own success.
Yeah, you can get ideas from other people, though. I mean, I've
Right.
had 3 or 4 ideas from listening to you today that I can implement. But as you say, ultimately, building your own sense of identity, and applying it to that.
Yeah. I'm curious, are you still turning off technology for 2 to 6 hours a day every day?
Yeah, I'm still doing it, and I'm still tracking it as well.
Really?
Thanks for remembering that. Yeah. Do you
Yeah.
know what? That's been. I mean, we spent January in Asia, and we talked about it a lot because I think even since we last did an interview, I think it's something that is becoming more and more of a problem. I think tech addiction and digital addiction is becoming more and more prevalent, and people are more affected by it. And we would be in this beautiful cafe in Thailand, watching the waves roll in, and maybe there might have been a sunset in the background or something like that. And almost always, if we looked around, most people were on their phones, and sometimes we were as well, because it's so hard to put it down even when you're aware of it. And how can one person battle 6,000 brilliant programmers and designers at Facebook or whatever it is? It's very hard to compete. So sometimes for me, the only way is switching off. And I've done it. I've done 4 hours today so far. And they were the best hours of my day.
Not surprising. So is it always in the morning? Is it at night sometimes? How do you set that up and actually make sure it happens?
Well, there's no particular hard and fast rule except that I track it. So if I have a big naught to write down in that column at the end of the day, I won't be happy about that. But really, it's just when it happens. So it definitely, in the morning, it definitely helps not to switch the phone on first thing. And today there was more than 2 hours when I didn't switch it on. And then I was with a friend in the afternoon before I spoke to you, and there was another 2-hour period where I didn't switch it on. So yeah, it's however you want to do it, and everyone makes different rules with it as well. For me, it's not actually the screens themselves that are the problem; it's the connectivity. So I'll read my book on my phone. It syncs up with my Kindle, and I'll read my book. If it's in airplane mode, I am quite happy, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm switched off. The moment I put the 3G on, and I'm getting WhatsApp messages from. I know you Americans don't really like WhatsApp very much, do you?
I don't even have it on my phone.
It's overwhelming in this country. There are so many WhatsApp chats to keep up with. Actually, it's fine as long as you just switch your phone off sometimes. And so, that seems to work for me. Using the screens is fine as long as it's in airplane mode.
Well, I like that distinction. That was actually going to be my next question, because I love to put mine on airplane mode as well, and just listen to a book or whatever. I'll go for a walk, and I actually my wife hates it. I'll go for a walk for about an hour, and she'll be texting me, and I won't get them because my phone is on airplane mode.
Yeah. That's the thing. You have to make those nearest and dearest to you just aware that they might not be able to get in touch with you for 12 to 14 hours. And, I totally get that some people, they have to remain, in certain jobs, you have to remain contactable. But it's really sad if you have to be contactable all the time, because you never get any peace and quiet.
Right.
So that's what suits me. And I've kept doing it, and certainly when I was away and I wasn't working, it was easier. But technology encroaches into areas that it didn't used to. For instance, now I live in central London, and Sky, the TV studios where I work, they're over in West London near Heathrow. and it's always a bit of a fiddly drive to get there. And I have to drive because I finish at weird hours of the night, and there's no public transport. And if I use Google Maps or Waze, I get there quicker. So whereas in the past, the car was a time where you'd switch off. Now you've got technology. I know it's just Waze, but it means you can't actually put it into airplane mode in that time. And you get the sense that more and more we need technology. I mean, you never used to have technology to hail a cab, did you? But now you use it for Uber kind of thing. So,
right.
So marking out those lines maybe is even more important.
Yeah, it's really fascinating how technology is, as you put it, kind of encroaching into more and more aspects of our life.
Just interrupting the interview for one moment to tell you that this podcast is brought to you by the website ketoclubuk.com, bringing you the best ketosis supplements, including something that I have every single day, Brain Octane in my coffee. You've probably heard me banging on about this bulletproof supplement before. Bulletproof Brain Octane, it's a type of MCT oil. It's pretty much the finest MCT oil that money can buy, and you can get it at a very good price on ketoclubuk.com. And if you're not in the UK, I'm not sure that you can get it. But if you are, it's a great place to go. And there's all kinds of info about keto on there as well. Right, back to the show. I'm actually, after this, I'm going to go meet a friend of mine, Dr. Steve, who's been on my podcast a few times, and he'd be a great person for you to talk to, actually. I met him doing the NLP training, and he now works with poker players, and he's had some incredible success with working with these poker players, not on anything to do with their poker, but just other stuff like meditation. And these are top poker players in the world, some of the most famous poker players in the world. What do you know? They start making more money and winning TV tournaments and all the rest of it once they put into all this stuff like meditation. And we are talking tonight about putting together a new NLP course that looks at tech addiction, which I'm really excited about, actually, because I think that the skills, cool. I think the skills of NLP could work quite well with tech addiction.
Yeah, I would. I mean, I'd sign up for that. I'd love to learn and take that. And,
great. Thanks. Yeah. You can definitely have a free course pass once it comes out.
Oh, man. No, you know what? I would happily pay for it. I think it's a conversation that we've had on the show previously, but, something that I try to put into my practice on a daily basis is, if I have friends that run product companies or write books, I don't ask them for free product or free copies of their book. I'd much rather buy it and support them. So if it comes out,
I love a freebie though.
No, I
so send me your book for free. No, I'm joking.
I do too. But hey, Tony, when you were on the OPP, you shared a focus trick, and it just popped into my head when you were talking about meditation and poker. But it's something that I used. I actually implemented that lesson from you right away and still continue to use it quite regularly. I'd love to get you to walk our audience through that now, since we may have a different listener base. But it was the one where you said, right before you go on the air, you think about 3 things that you feel or hear.
That is... It is my adaptation of the Betty Erickson hypnosis technique. So Dr. Milton Erickson is the kind of the father of hypnosis. And by the way, self-hypnosis is just another type of meditation. And I'm really pleased that it helped you, Ryan, because it is quite powerful, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah. And Betty Erickson came up with her own hypnosis technique, which in my opinion is better than anything that her husband invented. And the Betty Erickson technique involves bringing all your attention external. So you focus on 3 things that you can see right now while you're listening to this podcast. Might be, the color of the sky, and what you're wearing, and something in the room. And then 3 things that you can hear. Probably one of them, if you're listening to this podcast, is the sound of my voice. And you might be able to hear the hum of traffic outside, or maybe the noise that your fridge is making. And then 3 things that you can feel. So that might be the chair that you're sitting on, your feet on the floor, or the temperature of the air on your skin. And if you repeat this, 3 things that you can see, 3 things that you can hear, and 3 things that you can feel again and again, then all your attention goes external and you can't think about the things that you were worrying about. So I started to do this before, one of the biggest professional moments of my life was having a screen test at Sky Sports. It was the absolute dream job for me. And I was telling you this last time. It was the dream job for me. I really wanted the job and I was very nervous. And this helped me, before nervous moments, bring myself back down a bit. I didn't need hyping up. I just needed to chill out a little bit. It was almost like just a little drink of water for the brain doing this in the 1 minute before my screen test. Instead of thinking about all the things that I could say and all the things I needed to do and whether my tie was straight and everything else, and I had an earpiece in and I had a floor manager giving me signals and everything else, instead of thinking that, I just switched off, only for about 30 seconds. And that helped me just calm myself down and do better than anything else I could have thought about in that moment. So that's the Betty Erickson technique.
Yeah, that's really cool. And something else you just said in there is that you didn't need hyping up, that actually what you needed was kind of the break and the space. Talk a little bit about that. I mean, I've worked with a lot of athletes who will try to hype themselves up before a game and then they end up falling flat because they make the moment something bigger than what they can handle. And really what I try to coach them to do is exactly what you're saying there is, actually the opposite of hyping up before some big event.
There's the perfect level. It's interesting because it's pretty intense working environment working in TV. And not only because you're being watched by lots of people, but there's so many people in the office putting together this thing that you are the front man for. So at any one time, there's probably between 60 and 100 people at Sky working on the channel, and yet we're the kind of front men and front women for it. And therefore, if something goes wrong, they all feel let down as well. And the pressure of letting them down is almost more than looking like a fool in front of the viewers. So there's this kind of there's a kind of sweet spot of stimulation. You don't want to be too hyped up because that's not going to help. But by the same token, Ryan, you don't want to be too chilled out either. I mean, we were talking about L-ornithine, for example. I wouldn't take that, chills me out so much. I wouldn't take that before going on air. And I've taken some other supplements in the past, and it has been a disaster. And actually, I did a show recently. I work on 2 channels. I work on Sky Sports and Sky News, which is 24-hour news channel, which actually goes all around the world. And when I'm on that, rather than doing like a 2 or 3 hour show, I'll do small sports bulletins every hour. So I'll come on, read the sports headlines, and then I've got 58 minutes until the next one, if you see what I mean.
Right.
And in the lights are really bright in our studio, as you can imagine. It's like absolute midday, even when it's midnight. So 10 o'clock at night, I thought, I'm going to take my blue blocker glasses into work and put them on in between sports bulletins. So I did my sports bulletin and then I put the glasses on. Felt very chilled out. It was lovely. And 58 minutes later, they said in my ear, okay, Tony, it's almost time. So I took the glasses off again. I didn't wear them on air and did a sports bulletin. Ryan, I've got to tell you, it was 3 of the worst minutes of television that anyone has ever seen, where after having worn these blue blockers, I was too chilled out.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show the power of the blue blocking glasses and of changing your lights in the evening. I was so relaxed, I didn't have the required level of stimulation to make any sort of sense. And I was slurring my words and I was getting all my words wrong and I wasn't really thinking very quickly. So it shows the power of them. But yeah, you need to find that sweet spot of stimulation, I guess.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And I guess circling all the way back to blue blockers, they're not my favorite tool for protecting our eyes from the computer, but they are very powerful when we're out in public, whether you're under, on a plane or in an environment after dark where you're exposed to a lot of junk light. So yeah, you're right. They're really powerful there.
Yeah, they are. I mean, I was amazed. It's just so satisfying when you get proof that something works. And for me, that was the proof. But it's the same as doing a podcast as well. You need to be... I notice a real difference in me if I'm recording a podcast late at night to recording first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
You've got to find that right level of stimulation. You want, and maybe you've got an important meeting at work or whatever it is. Sometimes you want to be on it, but if you have 10 cups of coffee rather than 2, that might not help how lucid you appear and sound to your colleagues.
That's a really, really good point.
Right, it's been great to talk to you. Yeah, as always.
Yeah. Yeah, you too, Tony.
One of the things I always ask people on my podcast, and I've asked you before, is what is one book that you'd recommend and one tip for living with more energy, vitality, and motivation? But just on the book front, I haven't really had a chance to ask you about Fuck Your Feelings. So maybe you tell me quickly about that and where people can get it, and then the one tip for living with more energy.
All right. So that saves me from doing the shameless self-promotion when you ask for a book.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want you to do that. I've set it up very nicely for you.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, the book is Fuck Your Feelings, and it is a neuroscience-based exploration of why some people, high performers, succeed and other people do not. It's something that has fascinated me, and with my ability to work with elite athletes, Olympic medalists, and special forces people, but also be able to interview neuroscientists and cognitive behavioralists to really kind of put the pieces together to provide what I would only be able to explain as a user's manual for the space between our ears. Because if we can master our mind, we can accomplish anything and become the version of ourselves that we want to be. So, I'm really excited to put it out there and, hear people's response to it and hopefully help thousands of people, move from where they are in their lives to where they want to be.
That's awesome. And people are going to remember that title as well.
Yeah, it was a title that came to my mind as I was writing the book for 2 reasons. One, it's self-talk. It was something that I say to myself all the time, just, really fuck your feelings, dude. Do what you're supposed to do, no matter how you feel. And it's also very fitting because, in chapter 1 of the book, I lay out, some research from neuroscientist Antonio Damasio, who found that 95% of our decisions are made based on how we feel in any given moment. So again, this is sort of the premise of the book. If we're able to understand that and then control our minds and make decisions made based on what we know we should be doing rather than on how we feel, we will be able to guide and direct our lives down the path that we want for ourselves. So there is a lot of, NLP underpinnings to this, and I think you'll enjoy it, Tony. I'm excited to get a copy to you and hear your thoughts.
Yes, I'm going to pay for it.
Well, I'll send you an autographed copy for free too. How about that?
Oh wow. Okay, I'll have 2 copies and I'll give away one to someone else. What about the tip then for living with energy?
Yeah. So, well, I'll give you another book too. Okay. Since you asked that question for all of your listeners. We recently had the chance to sit down and interview a guy named Josh Mance for the Better Human Project. Yeah. And Josh is an American soldier who was shot in Iraq, and the wound actually was fatal. He flatlined for 15 minutes before life-saving measures brought him back.
Oh, I saw this in the list when I was looking through your podcast that you've recorded. This is amazing.
Yeah. It's fascinating. If people know anything about life-saving measures, they usually do CPR for 6 minutes, and after 6 minutes they call it. But Josh, being in the military and being worked on at a base by military doctors, they refused to call it and pronounce him dead. So they actually performed CPR and gave him life-saving measures for a full 15 minutes. And after 15 minutes, they got a pulse and brought him back to life. And I believe the number is like 9 or 12, but at a certain time, there's usually brain damage that is irreversible. And fortunately, he's had 0 permanent brain damage. But anyway, he wrote an amazing book called The Beauty of a Darker Soul, Overcoming Trauma Through the Power of Human Connection. And the book is, despite Josh's background in military, it's not a military book. I mean, he will talk about some of his experiences, but the book is about trauma and overcoming trauma and guilt and shame on a much wider, more universal scale. He spent the last 10 years speaking and helping people overcome trauma of all sorts. He is an amazing human, and the book is phenomenal. So I would highly recommend that to anybody, but especially people who have maybe dealt with trauma in their lives.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've made a note of that. Do you know what?
Yep.
I think most people have dealt with trauma of some description.
I think so too. And when you read his book, you start to understand that, I think there's a quote in his book where he said, it's not the fight, it's the constant threat of a fight. So, even if it's just constantly worrying about our finances or, constantly having stress about, work, I mean, these are things that, in the book, they define trauma. I don't think it's Josh's definition. I think it's one of the therapists that he has worked with or partnered with on some work that he's done. But they define it as something that fundamentally changes how we think the world should be. And I don't think there's a single person who has not experienced some type of event that changes how we think the world should be.
Mm. Very cool.
Yeah, so we'll shift gears a little bit. I'll give you the tip for better energy and vitality.
Yeah.
I think we'll stay on the mental side, and I think it is do something every day that makes you uncomfortable. I think that is a practice or a habit that almost forces us to grow as humans. And it just, the more you get outside of your comfort zone, the more things you actually bring into your comfort zone, and the more you inoculate yourself to the fear or the adversity of, being uncomfortable. And I think that's just a great place to be.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think by nature, I like to feel comfortable. and I think I have to push myself harder than some people to get outside my comfort zone. But when I do, I notice a benefit in every area and I'm buzzing. And it's when you grow, isn't it?
It is. It absolutely, I mean, you can't, I think by definition, I mean, you can't grow unless you do things that are outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they would be in your comfort zone and you would already have that and it wouldn't be growth. So,
Ryan, good
Tony,
stuff.
Well, Tony, you have to answer our final question.
I know. I'm very excited about it. What were the questions again?
It's 1A and 1B, and it is
1A and 1B, okay.
One tip to be better as a human, and then 1B is one tip to do better as humans.
Okay. One of the things that's been interesting for me is I started the podcast a few years ago because I kind of got very ill. I was in the jungle, and I probably told you this the last time that we chatted. Mm-hmm. And I had 3 months off work, 3 months when I didn't ever know if I'd go back to my TV job, 3 months when I had these terrible numb patches all over my face, and I was in bed and I couldn't even walk down the street. And at that kind of darkest point, I thought, if I ever get better, it'd be great to do a podcast called Zestology. And then eventually I did just start to get better. And it's a very slow process, I think. When you're dealing with anything, it's not like whether it's kind of low level fatigue or whether you are seriously ill in bed like I was. It's not like you listen to a podcast or you read a book and you click your fingers and the next day you're okay. It takes a while. And there are many layers of the onion to peel back. And one of the things that really helped for me was once I started to get back to full fitness, kind of go a little bit deeper. And for me, it was, when you talk about trauma, for me, it was kind of going back to my childhood, going back to growing up, and actually doing some serious examination of the regular behaviors that weren't serving me well, and specifically around relationships. I was basically just doing the same thing over and over again. And for that, I think NLP is really helpful. But when you can combine NLP with some kind of deeply therapeutic approach with a psychologist, wow, that's when you can start to make really deep changes and start to realize, okay, that thing that happened to me when I was 10 years old, that's had a real impact. And ever since, I've been doing this because of that. Well, of course, I'd had all these behaviors that totally weren't serving me. So it was really nice to kind of realize that, and looking at how one relates to other people and going as deep as possible, starting to understand yourself a little bit better. I think that is important. What was the question again?
I'm going to say that's your one tip to be better as a human. What is your one tip to do better as humans? How can we use what we're learning and acquiring as assets or skills to impact the lives of our friends, our families, our communities?
I think, I think one of the really interesting things about social media is that it only and people know this, but it only portrays one side of the story. And I don't necessarily think that I don't want to always read negative posts from other people, but I think that a constant stream of positivity is actually not necessarily that beneficial for you or other people. Because I think what you can end up doing is comparing yourself to that other person, number one. Or number two, looking at that Instagram post from someone else and thinking, you're not really like that. So I think introducing a note of humility and being able to kind of laugh at oneself, put oneself down, and be a little bit more honest in one's social media posts actually would be one of the things that could have the most impact. Because, when I look at how many people see the stories that I post on Instagram and the absolute drivel that I put on there, it's incredible, really. Is that we're all broadcasters now. So to be able to broadcast a more honest, authentic version of yourself, even when it's not particularly positive, I think that's something that could have an impact. I don't know if this is something that could have the most impact, but it could definitely make a difference.
No, I love that. We've discussed that a few times on the show. I think actually episode 2 with Emily Schramm, we talked about that quite a bit, and we touched on it with Caveman as well. So it's certainly something that is a recurring kind of topic and theme with what we're doing with Better Human Project. And I mean, even you and I talked about it a little bit earlier in this show, just where people are kind of starting to grow weary of social media being, like you said, it's just it's everyone's highlight reel, and we know that that's not really how life goes.
And it's not only that, it's the fact I noticed that, I would like to think of myself as a nice person, but sometimes I notice the self-talk, the stuff that's going on in my own head when I look at some other people's social media, that it's just not that healthy. There's quite a bit of criticism in there, and actually then it's just not helping me. So the only option is to block them.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. I think the words that we've been using, our digital footprint.
Yes, that's a good one.
Yeah. So kind of like your carbon footprint, but just being aware of our digital footprint.
All this ties into another word that I heard recently, which is the tech lash. There's now a tech lash taking place, and that's a good one. But listen, Ryan, thanks so much. I've really enjoyed chatting to you. Where can people find the book?
Well, the book is on Amazon, and if you just type in Ryan Munsey or type in "fuck your feelings" on Amazon, it'll be there. I'll give you a link, and you can put it on the show notes if you want. Make it easier for people.
Yes.
Of course, Better Human Project is the podcast, and you can follow me. Speaking of social media, I'm really trying to limit mine to only one platform. I happen to like Instagram the most, so that's where I am. It is at Ryan Munsey _. And website, ryanmunsey.com.
Brilliant.
What about you? Where can our listeners get more of you?
They can Google Zestology or Tony Wrighton, and they will find me. And actually, just one other thing to say. I'm not sure when you're putting this out there, but it might be a little bit from when we recorded it. If we have put together that NLP course on technology and kind of beating tech addiction, I'm really excited about that, because I do think that is something, for exactly those reasons that I was just telling you about Instagram, and that might be quite helpful, hopefully, for people. So if so, then I'll send you a link, and obviously it'll be on my website as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. We'll have links to all that stuff on the show notes for our listeners as well. Make it easy for everybody.
Good on you, Ryan. As always, it's been really good to chat.
Yeah, it's been a blast, Tony, and hopefully we can do this in person again soon.
Well, listen, if you're not plunging with Wim Hof deep into some ice bath somewhere at the end of April, then maybe I'll see it at Paleo FX. But otherwise, we'll definitely do it in person sometime soon.
Sounds like a plan.
All right.
Thank you so much, Tony.
Cheers, Ryan. That's it. Thank you to Ryan Munsey, and thank you for listening to Zestology as well. As always, if you want to share it with someone else, that is absolutely the best way to get the word out there. And you can click on the bottom right of your podcast app and easily share it by WhatsApp or email or Twitter or however you'd like to share it. That'd be awesome. Thank you. One more thing before I go. I'm very pleased to say that finally, after years of toing and froing, I've changed the Zestology designs, and we now have zesty colours on the Zestology images. So as you look at the Zestology logo on, maybe you're listening to this on your phone or something like that, you'll see that it's completely different now, with some zesty segments of orange and lemon. I hope you like it. I love it. It has been quite a long time in the making. I'm very left brain, which means I take a long time over a decision, but I like to get a decision right. And I'm working on my right brain and my intuition a little bit more. So it's time to release the new Zestology logo. Hope you like it. I definitely do. And the future is definitely orange as far as Zestology is concerned. So have a zesty week, and I'll see you soon.